Alan Watt. We're cutting through the matrix. Last night I was talking about the geoengineering that's been going on for years, as they pretend they're only now discussing the possibilities of doing it, which is utter nonsense. They've been doing it for many, many years. They know the side effects, and that's really what they're discussing, is how to mitigate them or keep them from the public. And it's quite easy to keep anything from the public because we're not too bright. But the book I was using yesterday was Policy Implications of Greenhouse Warming, Mitigation, Adaptation and the Science Base, published in 1992. The Bible, you might say, for the agenda. And I put the link up last night where you can go into the site yourself and government sites and download this particular book. But on page 433, it's got this to say. Remember, this is 1992. Geoengineering. In this chapter, a number of geoengineering options are considered. Then they go through the different options and the hoopla to do with how it might or might not work. But they say here, other geoengineering possibilities include reforesting the United States. I guess when people get off the land, you see, you can reforest it. That's why you don't have the habitat areas for Agenda 21. To increase the storage of carbon in vegetation, simulating an increase in oceanic biomass as a means of increasing the storage and natural sequestering of carbon in the ocean, and so on. Yada, yada, yada. This is important to recognize. Now, listen to this. Listen to this part here. 1992. For those who are still in their religious phase, who use words like, do you believe this or do you believe that? Do you believe in global warming? Do you believe in Y2K? That's a religious thing, you see. This is 1992. It says here, it is important to recognize that we are at present means in the now, for the harder thinking. We are at present involved in a large project of inadvertent geoengineering by altering atmospheric chemistry. And it does not seem inappropriate to inquire if there are countermeasures that might be implemented to address the adverse impacts. You understand what that just said now? Come on, we're back in junior school here, right? Let's do it again, children. It says, it is important to recognize that we are at present involved in a large project of inadvertent geoengineering by altering atmospheric chemistry. And it does not seem inappropriate to inquire if there are countermeasures that might be implemented to address the adverse impacts. So they knew then that there already were adverse impacts, since they're talking about countermeasures that might be implemented to address them, to alter them. And people who can still think clearly, to an extent at least, and plow through their gobbledygook and their different phrases they use to make it sound very scientific, will get a lot out of it. Most folk won't, because most folk really want to go into conspiracy sites, and whereas this kind of exciting, these aren't exciting things to read. Nothing that really happens or is of import is very exciting. It's very boring, dull and dry, but it's the most important information you'll ever find in your life is when you go through this kind of stuff. So they admit then they were already engaged in this project, this geoengineering project, a large project, they said, and it's been going on for an awful long time. Britain, by the way, has just been warned it's in for another week of freezing sleet and snow and blizzards in April. But that doesn't matter. We're apparently going to fry to death to see if they don't save us and all that rubbish. Remember, there's different reasons behind all of this. What's interesting too in this policy implications of greenhouse warming, mitigation, adaptation and the science base, it starts off with humans are the problem, right out of the Club of Rome, because they're the guys that dreamt that one up and they're proud to admit it in their own book. So humans, it's all to get us to depopulate. Mind you, this stuff too, it does mention in the writings in the book that some of the side effects will be sterilization of the general public and increased death rate, which is to their advantage, it says. To their advantage. Yeah, that's what it's about, folks. No conspiracy site there. You can go into the government one and find it, their own website. In 1998, in Canada, in Ontario here, they started spraying the skies in a serious manner. And I remember the day when it started, because I walked outside and I couldn't believe, I thought it was in some kind of movie shot, that it really was a checkerboard pattern, really tight together, like a fishing net above you, a white fishing net. It was that precise. And they were at least at half the height spraying it than they are today. I couldn't believe that folk didn't look up and see it. And from then on, it's been, of course, a roller coaster of spraying and spraying and spraying. And we all have read the different articles about, they're thinking about spraying the atmosphere to stop global warming, etc. But in reality, they've been doing something with it since at least 1998 on a serious, continuous basis. And they were doing it for long before that, for years, testing it on and off. And I've read the articles where they test things on and off over different countries. But this is for serious. And it says, and of course too, I've talked about the aluminum oxide and the barium, which has been found in it. And I've gone into the writings of Teller, who was the inventor of the H-bomb, who worked for the Pentagon and who came up with the idea of flooding the air with metallic particles and using what's now called HARP technology, and electromagnetic pulsing across the atmosphere. The very thing that Brzezinski talked about in Between Two Ages, where he said that the techniques of weather control manipulation would come into being. But he also touched on, too, how certain things could affect the minds of people, make them tranquil or aggressive, depending on the frequency, because this stuff literally makes the atmosphere itself like a chemical conductor, much more agreeable to electrical variations and transmission. So this article here is from Science. It says, levitating nanoparticles may make for better geoengineering. So it's bad enough when they're already dosing you with stuff, and it's definitely affecting people's lungs and sinuses, etc., ongoing infections since 98. So now they want to go into the nanoparticles, if they haven't already, you see. Now, nanoparticles of, say, barium and aluminum oxide and stuff, this stuff literally, apart from making you rather senile, is highly carcinogenic as well. But it doesn't matter, that would all tie in with the big plan, wouldn't it? Especially over areas where they want to bring down the populations. And if you don't have the right kind of chelation therapies, etc., which I'm sure the bigwigs get, then this stuff's going to stay in your system. A recent analysis of geoengineering options indicated that while pumping chemicals into the upper atmosphere would work, well, they know it would work because they've been doing it, the approach comes with significant risks. Since the chemicals would gradually come back out of the atmosphere, these schemes would require constant input to remain effective. That's why they do it every day. A paper released in PNAS this week suggests there might be a lower effort alternative, nanoparticles that are structured in a way that helps them control their altitude. Even if CO2 emissions, here we go, are eventually reduced, it's got nothing to do with it. We may have put enough in the atmosphere by then to ensure that some form of geoengineering may be needed to lower the global. If they lower the global temperature anymore, I'll be sitting on an ice floe. I think, just mass. It was 20 below zero Fahrenheit last night here, which is a bit chilly. Aerosols in the upper atmosphere increase the Earth's albedo, the overall reflected of the planet, reducing global temperatures by reflecting more sunlight back into space. Chemical aerosols are popular geoengineering candidates, but they have their own problems. For example, sulfates in the lower stratosphere can accelerate removal of ozone, and we'd have to constantly pump more into the upper atmosphere. That's a great business for somebody. And believe you me, big chemical companies are obviously involved in this, making an awful lot of money. The main advantage of the proposed nanostructures over chemical aerosols is their ability to control their altitude. So the proposed nanostructures do this by taking advantage of what are called photophoretic forces. These forces arise from a temperature difference between the nanostructure and the surrounding atmosphere. If a cold gas particle strikes a warmer nanostructure, then the gas particle will recoil off with more energy. At least that's a PR for the salesman. That results in a force on the particle. The amount of energy transferred in this process is a property of the material and a function of the temperature. and is described by something called the accommodation coefficient. Sounds very impressive, eh? By constructing nanostructures with different values, one can change the net force on the nanostructure. So, what are they going to use for it, eh? Well, goodness me, they're back to aluminum again. It says aluminum and barium again, titanate. The aluminum layer reflects sunlight but is transparent to thermal infrared. The barium trinitrate layer has a higher density than the aluminum layer and interacts with the atmospheric electric field to orient the disk with the reflective side up. The difference in between aluminum and barium trinitrate also produces a net photophoretic force, levitating the disk with a force up to 3 times its weight, to say. Well, breathing all this stuff in, that'll go right into your bloodstream through the alveolar tissue in the lungs. Back with more after this break.